I learned what exhaustion truly meant the morning I woke to 8 children in my house. Not my children. My grandchildren, ages 3 to 15. All orphaned 3 weeks prior when their parents, my son James and his wife Sarah, died when their wagon overturned on the road to town. I was 61 years old. I'd raised my children already. Buried my husband William 5 years back. Earned my quiet years. Instead, I stood in my kitchen before dawn, counting heads like a shepherd, counting sheep, wondering how long I could keep this flock alive. The house that had felt spacious when William was alive now seemed to shrink daily. Boots lined the entryway. Too many boots, never the right size, always muddy. Coats hung on every hook and spilled onto the floor. Toys appeared underfoot like traps designed to break an old woman's hip. The air smelled of too many bodies in too small a space. Unwashed hair, baby's sour milk. The faint scent of grief that clings to everything after sudden death. I made porridge that morning like every morning, stretched it thin to feed 8 mouths. Little Emma, only 3, cried for her mama. My heart broke every time because she meant Sarah. And Sarah was gone. Emma didn't understand. Gone. She just knew her mother wasn't there. And I wasn't her mother. Though she'd started calling me Mama anyway. I'd told her gently, "I'm Grandma, sweetheart." She'd looked at me with those enormous eyes and said, "Mama." Anyway, some battles you don't win. Thomas, the oldest at 15, tried to be the man of the house. Too young for that weight. I saw it in how his shoulders curved inward, how he startled at loud noises, how he chopped firewood with desperate intensity, like he could split the world's problems along with the logs. The middle children, ranging from 6 to 12, moved through the house like ghosts. Quiet when they should have been wild. Careful when they should have been careless. Children who'd learned too young that the world breaks people you love. I'd expected my 60s to be quieter. After William died, I'd made peace with solitude. Found rhythm in my own company. The house had felt too big then, echoing with absence. Now it felt too small, bursting with need I couldn't meet. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept through the night. Someone always needed something. Water, comfort, reassurance that morning would come, that they'd wake up, and this wouldn't be a nightmare they could escape. I gave them what I could. It wasn't enough. That morning, standing at the window, watching the sun rise over land, William and I had worked for 40 years. I admitted something I'd been avoiding. I was failing them. Not because I didn't love them. Love was abundant, cheap, everywhere. I was failing because love alone doesn't feed children, doesn't give them what they'd lost, doesn't multiply one tired woman into the army of support they needed. Emma wandered into the kitchen, dragging her cloth doll. "Mama hungry. I'll get you breakfast, sweetheart." "Mama," she insisted, pointing at her stomach. I knelt down, joints protesting. "Grandma will make you porridge." She studied me seriously. Then, with the brutal honesty of 3-year-olds, "You're old." "Yes," I agreed. "I am." I was 61, and I was drowning. And the knowing didn't change anything. I still had to wake up tomorrow and drown again. That's what love requires. You keep swimming even when you know you're going under. I found Tommy Walsh wandering near my fence 2 days later, 4 years old, crying, clearly lost. I recognized him immediately, Henry Walsh's grandson from the property next door. Henry and I had been neighbors for years, the kind of neighborly that meant waving across the fence, sharing news of weather, helping in emergencies, but mostly keeping to our own lives. I'd known his wife, Clara, liked her. She'd died from fever 2 months before I lost James and Sarah. I'd been too deep in my own grief to notice his properly. I took Tommy's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you home." He sniffled but didn't resist. We walked across the property line into Henry's yard, and I noticed everything at once. Laundry hanging tangled on the line, twisted wrong and likely to mildew. Firewood pile dangerously low for November, fence posts leaning. Porch steps that needed repair before someone broke an ankle. The house looked tired, defeated. I knocked. Henry opened the door, and I saw myself reflected back. Gray face, exhausted eyes. That particular hollowness that comes from grief, layered over responsibility, layered over bone deep. Weariness. He saw Tommy, and his whole body sagged with relief. "Thank you," he said. "Just that. Thank you." "He's safe," I said. Just that. He's safe. Neither of us offered more words. What was there to say? We both knew nothing was safe anymore. The world broke people you loved without warning. Wagons overturned. Fevers burned too hot. Safety was a fiction we told children so they'd sleep at night. Through the open door, I counted children visible in the front room. 5. I knew he had 6 total. Same impossible mathematics I faced. More children than hands. More need than hours in the day. Henry Walsh had lived a quiet life next door. Kept to himself, mostly after Clara died. I'd known he'd taken in his grandchildren after his daughter and son-in-law passed. But I hadn't known it was killing him the same way mine were killing me. He was drowning too. Somehow, that made me feel less alone and more terrified. If both of us went under, who'd save the children? "You need firewood," I said. Then immediately regretted it. Sounded like criticism. "I need a lot of things," he said. No defensiveness. Just honesty. I nodded, turned to leave. "Martha," he called. I stopped. "Do you need anything?" The question was absurd. I needed everything. Time, energy, another pair of hands. My son back, my husband back. My life before it shattered into 14 pieces that all needed feeding. "No," I said, "thank you." His expression said he understood the lie. We both lied. We were both drowning. What else could we do? The next morning, I found firewood stacked neatly by my door. No note. I knew who'd left it. That evening, I cooked extra cornbread and left it on Henry's porch after dark. Neither of us acknowledged these gifts. Both of us understood. This was the language of the desperate. We couldn't say thank you, because that meant admitting we needed help. And admitting need meant showing the cracks. And showing the cracks meant risking complete collapse. I watched from my window as his children and mine played together in the space between our properties. They weren't afraid of needing each other. They ran to each other naturally, shared games and laughter like it cost nothing. When had I become so scared? When had I learned that needing meant losing? That depending meant eventual destruction? The children knew something I'd forgotten. Or maybe they hadn't lived long enough to learn what I'd learned. Either way, watching them, I felt ancient. Worn, used up, inside. Emma called for me. I went. Thomas hurt his hand badly 3 days later. My fault entirely. I'd asked him to chop firewood. He was 15, old enough, I'd thought, strong enough. What I hadn't admitted was that I'd asked, because I was too tired and he was the only one capable. I'd put a child in a man's position because I had no other choice. The axe slipped. Not his fault the handle was old, the wood splitting. It caught his palm, opened a gash that bled too much and too fast. I wrapped it tight, kept pressure, got the bleeding stopped. But Thomas's face, when he looked at his bandaged hand, told me everything. He thought he'd failed me. Thought he'd let me down. "It's not your fault." I told him I should have been more careful. You should have been playing. You're 15 years old. I'm the man of the house now." And there it was. The weight I'd put on him without meaning to, the responsibility that would crush him if I let it. That evening, Henry Walsh appeared at my door. "Martha," he said, "we need to talk." I let him in. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where William and I had shared 40 years of meals, where I'd fed my children, where I now fed my grandchildren with never quite enough food to go around. "We're both drowning," Henry said. No preamble, no softening. What if we helped each other? Every instinct I had screamed. The word partnership stuck in my throat like a bone. Last partner I'd had was William. Before that, my father, men I'd loved. Men who'd left me one to death. One to death by proxy through our son. Partnership meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant eventual devastation. But Thomas's bandaged hand was my fault. Emma's tears every night were my failure. Pride was expensive. Could I afford it when the price was their suffering? What are you suggesting? I asked. Practical arrangement. Henry said, "You cook for 14. I'll handle repairs and heavy labor. We watch all the children together. Take turns so each of us gets respite. Share resources. Share burden. People will talk. People always talk. Let them. It's not proper. Proper doesn't keep children fed." He was right. I hated that he was right. This would be business, I said. An arrangement. Nothing more. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, sadness. Nothing more. He agreed. I should have said no. Should have protected myself. But I looked at Thomas's bandaged hand, thought of Emma crying for her mama, remembered the weight of 8 children on shoulders not built for such carrying. "Yes," I heard myself say. "All right." The relief on Henry's face was so naked I had to look away. We were both that desperate, both that broken, both pretending we could survive what was killing us. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "I'll bring my children for breakfast." After he left, I stood in my kitchen counting plates. 14? I'd need to set 14 places. The table wasn't long enough. Nothing was enough. It started practically. I told myself it would stay that way. I needed to believe that lie. 2 weeks into our arrangement, I started noticing things I shouldn't notice. The way Henry tested fence posts before trusting them. How he stacked firewood with the split side facing out so it dried properly. The soft hum he made when concentrating on repairs. His gentleness with frightened children. I told myself I was being practical, assessing whether the partnership worked, observing for the children's sake. All lies. I was noticing Henry Walsh the way I hadn't noticed anyone since William. The way I'd sworn I never would again. Mornings developed a rhythm. His 6 children and my 8 gathered at my table for breakfast. The table still wasn't long enough, so the littlest ones sat on cushions on the floor. Thought it was an adventure after breakfast. Henry handled outdoor work while I managed inside tasks. The older children helped. The younger ones played. It shouldn't have worked. 14 children should have been chaos. Sometimes it was, but more often, it was something else. Something like family. Henry had this way of listening to children. Actually, listening. Not the half attention adults give while thinking of other things. Full presence. When my Tommy told him about a bird's nest he'd found, Henry stopped fixing the fence, crouched down to the boy's level, asked real questions, made me wonder when I'd stopped doing that. Made me wonder what else I'd stopped doing. One afternoon, He brought me coffee. Didn't ask how I took it. Just set it beside me, little cream. No sugar. Exactly right. You noticed, I said, before thinking, I notice a lot of things. I didn't know what to say to that. Focused on my mending instead. That evening, I made his favorite stew. His daughter had mentioned it once. Weeks ago. I'd remembered. He noticed, didn't comment. But I saw recognition in his eyes. We were noticing each other. Dangerous territory. The days were full of small kindnesses we pretended not to exchange. He fixed the hinge on my cupboard that had stuck for months. I mended the tear in his coat. He brought extra vegetables from his root cellar. I made extra bread. Neither of us acknowledged these gestures. Both of us understood. Late evenings were hardest. After children were finally asleep, 14 children took considerable settling. Henry and I would sit on my porch, too tired for words. The silence should have been awkward. It wasn't comfortable quiet. Dangerous thing, that I found myself listening for his footsteps during the day, watching for him out the window, memorizing the way he moved, the sound of his laugh when the children said something funny, the patience in his voice when explaining things. One night, I saw him comfort my Tommy after a nightmare. Spoke low and patient, held the boy until the shaking stopped, stayed until sleep came. Something in my chest cracked watching that. Some wall I'd built carefully, brick by brick, developed a fissure. I was in trouble. The knowing didn't stop anything. Trouble has its own momentum. You're good with them, I said later. On the porch? So are you. I'm tired. We're both tired. He paused. Less tired together. Though, that was true. Burden shared was burden halved. Joy shared was joy doubled. Mathematics of partnership I hadn't expected. Henry, I started, then stopped. Didn't know how to finish. I know, he said quietly. What did he know? What did I know? That this arrangement had stopped being arrangement. Somewhere along the way that I'd started counting his presence as necessary as breathing, that the thought of going back to separate houses made my chest tight. I didn't ask. He didn't explain. We sat in silence. Comfortable, dangerous silence. When he left for his house that night, I caught myself hoping he'd look back. He did. Our eyes met across the yard. Something passed between us. Recognition, understanding, fear. I was in trouble. Deep trouble. The kind that ruins carefully constructed walls. The kind that makes you hope again, when you'd learned hoping was luxury you couldn't afford. The breaking came on a Thursday, third Thursday in November, anniversary of William's death. Plus 3 months exactly since losing James and Sarah. Grief doesn't follow schedules. It hits when it wants. That day, it wanted everything. I held together through breakfast, held together through morning chores, held together through mediating children's disputes and teaching lessons and pretending I was fine. Fine. That word I'd learned to say with conviction while dying inside. Evening came. Children fed, finally settled. Henry had gone home to put his youngest to bed. I stood washing dishes at my sink, where I'd stood washing dishes for 40 years, where William used to come up behind me and steal bites of whatever I was cooking, where I'd washed baby bottles for James and his siblings, where everything familiar had become unbearably empty. Couldn't breathe. Just suddenly couldn't breathe. I sank to the kitchen floor, not gracefully, just collapsed. Cried the ugly kind of crying, helpless, choking. The kind that comes from holding too much for too long. William died in his sleep 5 years ago. Merciful. They'd said, quick. James died in seconds when the wagon overturned. Quick. I was the one left with slow dying. The kind where you wake up every morning and remember all over again what you've lost. I don't know how long I sat there. Time stopped meaning anything. Henry found me. He'd come back to return some tools. Stood in the doorway, saw me shattered on the floor, and I waited for him to leave. Who wants to see someone broken? Who stays for that? He did. Sat down on the floor beside me. Didn't say it was okay. Didn't tell me to stop. Just handed me his handkerchief and stayed. William died 5 years ago today. I managed. I know. You know, Clara used to mark it on the calendar. Said you needed checking on this week. Clara, Henry's wife, who'd noticed things, who'd cared, who was gone, too. I'm sorry, I said. About Clara, I'm sorry about William, and James, and Sarah. We sat on my kitchen floor. 2 people who'd lost everyone. Surrounded by children who'd lost everyone. Trying to survive what was unsurvivable. I don't know if I can do this. I whispered. The children, any of it, all of it. Henry was quiet a moment. Then, you don't have to do it alone. I've always been alone, even when William was alive. Really, it's safer, alone. Safer, he said. Not better. I'd shown him the broken parts, the parts I kept hidden from everyone. Even myself most days. He'd seen me helpless. Now he'd know I wasn't strong enough for this. Wasn't strong enough for anything. Thank you for staying, I said. Where else would I go? That simple question undid me more than anything. Where else would he go? As if his place was here. With me. In my mess. And my grief. And my failure. As if that was natural. Obvious. We sat until my crying stopped. Until I could breathe again. Until the floor got too uncomfortable for old bodies. He helped me stand. His hand was warm, steady. Tomorrow comes whether we're ready or not. He said, I know. We'll face it together. After he left, I lay in bed staring at ceiling. He'd seen my worst. Stayed anyway. I didn't know what terrified me more, that he might leave or that he might not. Because if he stayed, I'd have to admit I wanted him to. And wanting meant needing. And needing meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant eventual destruction. But maybe, whispered a small voice I'd tried to silence, maybe it also meant living again. Winter came hard that year. By December, 4 children were sick, with fever, 2 his, 2 mine. Crisis has a way of stripping pretense. When your children are burning with fever, you don't have energy for maintaining walls. You just survive. We moved through those 3 days like water finding its path. Natural. Inevitable. He nursed while I managed the well children. I nursed while he cooked and cleaned. We traded shifts through the night. Anticipated needs without speaking. Became a single unit without discussing it. The worst night was when Emma's fever spiked. 104. Too high. Dangerously high. I cooled her with wet cloths. But the fever wouldn't break. Her little body shook. Her eyes didn't focus right. I'd already lost my son. I couldn't lose his daughter, too. Henry sat with me through the dark hours. Didn't offer empty reassurances. Just stayed. Handed me fresh cloths. Took turns holding Emma when my arms got tired. Prayed when I couldn't find words. She'll be all right, I said. Trying to believe it. Yes. She has to be. Martha. He took my hand. Whatever happens, you're not alone in it. That's when I understood. This wasn't arrangement anymore. This wasn't trading labor and resources. This was partnership, trust, something deeper I was afraid to name. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, Emma's fever broke. She opened her eyes, looked at me with recognition, said, "Thirsty." I've never heard a more beautiful word. By morning, all 4 children were improving. The crisis passed. We'd survived. All of us. Henry fell asleep sitting up in the chair beside Emma's bed. I covered him with a blanket, stood watching him sleep. When had his face become so familiar? When had his presence become necessary? As breathing, I was protecting. Him too now. Realized it in that moment. Partnership meant equal risk. I'd guarded my heart so carefully. When had I started guarding his? The children recovered over the next days. Slowly, but steadily. The house felt different after, or maybe I felt different. Hard to tell sometimes where the house ended and I began. We'd lived here so long, William and I, that the walls held memories like wallpaper. Now they were holding new memories. Henry's voice, 14 children's laughter. Different life in these rooms. One evening, cleaning up after supper, I noticed I'd set 2 coffee cups out without thinking. Old habits. I told myself, lies. Myself answered, "You always take your coffee the same way," I asked him. Since I was 20. Since my mother taught me, she said sugar was for special occasions. This isn't special enough. I looked at him. At the man who'd sat with me on my kitchen floor, who'd held my granddaughter through fever, who showed up every day, even though leaving would be easier. "I suppose it is," I said. He smiled. Small thing. That smile changed everything. Mrs. Henderson saw Henry and me in town together the following week. We'd taken all 14 children to buy supplies, ambitious undertaking that involved considerable chaos and 3 near disasters involving chickens. But we'd managed. Mrs. Henderson smiled that knowing smile. "You 2 make a lovely couple." The word couple hit me like a fist. I managed some non-committal response. Hurried the children along, but the word stuck. Couple. Couple meant commitment. Commitment meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant eventual destruction, and it always ended in destruction. That evening, after children were settled, I rehearsed my speech. We should return to separate households. Spring was coming. Children were healthier now. We didn't need this arrangement anymore. All lies. Transparent lies. But fear has its own logic. I found Henry teaching my grandsons to whittle on the porch. His patience was infinite. Thomas held the knife wrong, and Henry showed him gently, again and again. Never frustrated. The boys leaned into him with trust. I'd thought they'd lost forever. My speech died in my throat. Love had destroyed me twice. First, when William's heart stopped. Second, when that wagon wheel broke. How much destruction could one woman survive? How much was I required to endure? I watched Henry's hands, guiding Thomas's smaller ones, teaching him to carve with the grain. Patient, present. Everything I'd told myself I didn't need. Everything I'd been lying about wanting. Safety meant being alone. But alone meant dying slowly from the inside, which was worse, risking another shattering. Or guaranteeing I'd never be whole again. Martha. Henry had noticed me standing there, just checking on things. I said, "We're good. Thomas is getting the hang of it." Thomas beamed, pride in his face, When had I last seen him look like a boy instead of a burdened man that night? After Henry went home, I lay in bed thinking, planning, trying to calculate acceptable risk, trying to find safe path forward. There wasn't one. Love isn't safe. Never was. Never would be. The question wasn't whether loving Henry would hurt eventually. Everything hurt eventually. The question was whether living without him would hurt more. Every cautious voice in my head screamed to protect myself. Keep walls intact. Preserve what little safety I'd built. But those walls were prison, as much as protection. And I was so tired of being locked inside my own fear. I didn't sleep much that night. Next evening, when Henry came for supper, I asked him to stay after children were asleep. For coffee, I said. Didn't say why. He understood something had shifted. Men and their quiet knowing. Terrifying gift. That, I'll stay, he said. Spring evening, children playing in the yard, their laughter floating through open windows. Henry and I sat on the porch with coffee, watching the sun set over land that had seen so much loss and was learning to hold joy again. The silence between us was comfortable, had been for months. But tonight, it felt weighted, full of things unsaid. I'd spent 2 days gathering courage. Now I either spoke or lost my nerve entirely. Henry, I said. This stopped being an arrangement somewhere along the way. For me, at least. He was quiet. I forced myself to look at him. For me, too, he said finally. Wondered if you'd noticed. When did you know? The night you cried on the kitchen floor. I sat down beside you and thought, this is where I belong. Scared me senseless. You were scared, terrified. I'd lost Clara. Didn't think I could survive loving someone again. But there I was, already loving you, without permission or planning or any sense at all. And every cautious voice in my head screamed to stop talking. Keep safe. Preserve what little protection I'd built. I ignored them all. Some truths demand speaking even when your voice shakes. I'm 61 years old, I said. I've loved and lost twice. I'm terrified. But I'm choosing this anyway. Choosing you. Choosing us. Martha, let me finish. I spent 5 years after William died learning to be alone. Strong alone. Sufficient alone. Convinced myself that was enough. That asking for more was greedy, dangerous. I took a breath. I was wrong. We're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be brave enough to not be alone. Henry took my hand. His palm was rough from work. Warm. Real. I don't have pretty words, he said. I'm just a man who's grateful every morning that you said yes to this arrangement. Who's grateful every evening that I get to sit here with you? Who loves you more than is probably wise? Wisdom is overrated. He laughed. Actual laugh. Coming from you. That's revolutionary. I learned something, I said. Bravery isn't absence of fear. Bravery is choosing love even when you know exactly how much it can cost. I know. I'm choosing anyway. The children's voices carried across the yard. Emma was bossing the older boys around. They were letting her. Mostly. Tommy and Thomas were building something together. The others played some complicated game involving sticks and considerable dramatic flair. They're good children. Henry said, They are. They'll be all right. We'll be all right, too. I leaned against him. His arm came around my shoulders. Natural. Easy. Like we'd been doing this for years instead of months. People will definitely talk now, I said. Let them. We'll give them something worth talking about. Henry Walsh, are you proposing? I'm 63 years old. Martha, I've got no time for games. Yes. I'm proposing, marry me, make this arrangement permanent. Let me spend whatever years I have left sitting on this porch with you. Love at 61 looks different than love at 20. It's quieter. Built on smaller things, shared coffee and folded laundry and children's laughter. Maybe that makes it stronger. Or maybe I just needed to believe that. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed me then. Gentle. Sure. A promise made flesh. The children noticed. Of course. Started cheering. Came running over, questions tumbling over each other. When were we getting married? Would we all live together? Could they call us Grandma and Grandpa? Yes, Henry said to all of it. Yes to everything. Emma climbed into my lap. Mama happy. For the first time in years. The word didn't break me. Yes, sweetheart. Mama's happy. Me too, she said, settled against my chest. Perfect weight. Perfect trust. I looked at Henry over her head. He smiled. That small smile that changed everything. I'd spent so long protecting my heart. I'd forgotten hearts were meant to be used. Meant to be given. Meant to be broken and mended and broken again. That was living. The alternative was just surviving. And I was done merely surviving. Tomorrow we'll tell people, Henry said. Tomorrow. I agreed. Tonight, let's just sit here. So we did. Sat on the porch as the sun set. Surrounded by 14 children who'd lost everything and were learning to build something new. 2 60-year-olds who'd survived storms and chosen to weather the next ones together. Somewhere in that chaos, we'd fallen in love. Not the desperate love of youth. The steady love of people who knew exactly what love cost and decided it was worth paying. We married 6 weeks later. Small ceremony. Judge from town, neighbors as witnesses. 14 children who'd already been calling us Grandma and Grandpa for months, making it official. Mrs. Henderson cried, said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. I thought about how she'd called us a couple that day in town, how I'd panicked. Funny how terror can transform into gratitude given enough courage and time. Now, 6 months into married life, late summer settling over the land like a blessing, I stood at my kitchen window, our kitchen window, and counted blessings instead of children. 14 children. Still chaos. But joyful chaos. They'd learned to be family. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. They fought like siblings, loved like siblings, protected each other fiercely. People asked how we managed 14 children. Truth was, we managed because we weren't managing alone. Every burden halved. Every joy doubled. Mathematics of partnership I'd needed Henry to teach me. I thought I knew what love was at 20 when I married William. I didn't. Love at 61 is choosing to be vulnerable when you know exactly what vulnerability costs. It's choosing anyway, choosing daily. Choosing in small things, coffee made just right. The blanket tucked around sleeping shoulders. The hand held across the table. Emma was 4 now. She called me Grandma, called Henry Grandpa, and was learning that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up, who stays, who chooses you every morning. Henry came up behind me at the window, wrapped his arms around my waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. How different? Everything is. The better different, much better. Through the window, I watched our children playing. Thomas teaching the younger ones to whittle. Emma organizing some elaborate game. The others scattered across the yard in various states of productive chaos. We didn't rescue each other, I said. No, We survived together. There's a difference. Henry was quiet a moment. There is. Rescue implies one person saves another. We just held each other up until we could both stand. That was it exactly. I'd learned so much in these months. That life offers second chances if you're brave enough to take them. That family is built through daily choice, not just blood. That love doesn't follow timelines or logic. That asking for help isn't weakness, but wisdom. That 61 isn't too old to start over. Isn't too old to fall in love. Isn't too old to build something new from the ruins of what you've lost. You ever regret saying yes? I asked, to the arrangement or the marriage? Either both? He turned me around to face him. Never. Not once. You. Not once? It was true. Even on hard days, and there were still hard days, would always be hard days. I didn't regret choosing this. Choosing him. Choosing us. The sun was setting. Evening chores needed doing. Children needed corralling for supper. Life went on. Demanding and beautiful and utterly ordinary. We should get them inside, I said. We should. Neither of us moved. In a minute. Henry said, in a minute. I agreed. We stood at the window, his arms around me, watching our combined family thrive. Watching the life we'd built from impossible circumstances and stubborn hope. Somewhere in that chaos of grief and children and shattered expectations, 2 60-year-olds had fallen in love. Not the passionate love of youth that burns bright and fast. The steady love of people who'd survived storms and chose to weather the next ones together. The love that shows up every morning, that holds through fever and tears and ordinary Tuesdays. We built something neither could have built alone. We built home. And that evening, surrounded by the sounds of children playing and supper cooking and life insisting on continuing, I understood the deepest truth I'd ever learned. We're meant for each other not in some predetermined destiny way, but in the way that broken things sometimes fit together better than whole ones. In the way that people who've survived loss understand each other's silence. In the way that choosing love after learning its cost makes that love stronger, not weaker. I'd spent so long protecting my heart. I'd forgotten hearts were meant to be used, meant to be given, meant to break and mend and break again. That was living. That was love. That was the gift we gave each other every day. Come on, I said finally. Let's gather our children. Our children. Such simple words. Such profound truth. We went out together to call them home.